Good morning, everyone. Continue your conversations and please continue voting. We want to get our panel discussion started in just a couple of moments, and while you're doing that, I would like for our panelists to introduce themselves. So if you'd pick up your microphone, James, I'm going to start down with you and we'll move down this way. Dr. Isley will pass on you. We all know who you are. So James, if you would, please.
Good morning, everyone. I'm James Bile, local business owner. I have two businesses. One is Multi-Automatic Tool and Supply, and we're in Walker area. We supply tooling mostly to the automotive industry and heavy equipment industry. So we're a distributor and we have 6 employees. And then I also own Belding Tool and Machine, which is a CNC machining company. The two companies are separate but somewhat interrelated. In fact, my banker makes sure they're interrelated. But thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Janis Petrini. I'm the owner and operator of Express Employment Professionals. And we are a company that helps company find talent and talent find companies. So we work in professional and executive search as well as administrative, skilled trades, and entry-level to semi-skilled. We also have a training division. So we're in the workforce and the workplace every day, listening to employers and listening to the workforce.
Good morning. I'm Jeff Karger with Jones Lang LaSalle, or JLL. We're a large commercial real estate global firm. I specifically run the Grand Rapids office here, and I'm downtown, so I do a lot of corporate work and office work in and around the West Michigan area.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Alisha Cieslak, and I work for Gordon Food Service. We supply food and food service products to anywhere you would eat a meal outside of the home, like the lovely breakfast we all enjoyed here today. I lead our legal and our enterprise risk management function. So a lot of the issues that we're going to talk about today are heavy on our hearts and minds, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, panelists all. And it was just happenstance that we all were handed a bottle of water before we came out here by Alisha. Thank you.
With the Gordon Food Service label. Product placement intentional.
Thank you all for being here this morning. I think it's very important. First of all, I want to say it's impressive. This is 134 years that these meetings have been taking place. And just to dispel the rumor, I have not been here for all of those meetings. But it's important to be here at this time because there are so many important issues, and you all have voted. And I apologize because I cannot see the top issue up there. So, Doctor, can you see that?
Yeah, so number 1 is real estate and the future of work, and number 2 is tools to retain high-performing talent.
All right, well, let's start with real estate and the future of work. I'm going to go right in the middle here because I think you'll have something to say about that, Jeff.
Absolutely. I believe I have this conversation several times a day, every day. So thank you. I think we're going to talk a lot today about employment and employees, and it's an employee market. And I think that really translates into what we're seeing in the office market and the corporate real estate world, in that it's an employee market as it pertains to hybrid, work from home, things of that nature. And as long as it stays kind of an employee market, I don't see that changing much, because we used to see a mandate, let's say coming back Labor Day or specific holidays. I'm not seeing that anymore. It's really playing itself out, and we'll see that play out throughout 2022. And I think employers are not going to make many demands on that just because they want a brain drain coming out of their organization, so to speak. So when I talk about this, a lot of times I talk kind of analogy, and quite frankly, I stole this from Ryan Anderson from Miller Knoll, but the analogy I look at is coming into the office is a lot like going out to a restaurant where we can all buy groceries and we can go home and make dinner and be with our family. But if we're going to go to a restaurant, we want an experience. We want that ambiance. We want that service. We want to break bread with friends we haven't seen in a while. So I see that analogy in the office market, that if you want people to come back into the office market, you got to create an experience for them to come back into. So I kind of touched on a few things there, but I could go on for a long period of time on this, but I don't want to take away from a lot of the other panelists here.
Well, one of the things when we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, I mean, there's the difference between jobs that can be done remotely and the jobs that can't be. Like in your business, James, you can't manufacture from my front living room like I worked at home for 6 months. Janis, what do you find from people when you're talking about employment and their preferences? How does that meet up with working remotely or going back into the office environment?
Well, we see things all across the board. I think what we've seen, certainly, obviously if somebody's in a position, in a global position, they're probably working from home. But we're starting to see a move to sort of a hybrid model where companies are being very flexible to meet the demands of employees, but they're also wanting them to come back in for more engagement, more creativity, more innovation. We've had employees that have been on the front line serving essential providers this entire COVID season, and they've been showing up to work every day, and companies are looking at their overall depth of care, their well-being, really focusing on culture, and really caring for their employees at a level that we've never seen before. But I think what the shift is that employers aren't looking more now for what the employees can do for them, but organizations are looking at what they need to do for their employees. And so it's not one size fits all anymore. COVID has really been the accelerant for employers to really become an employer of choice, to really look at each individual employee's needs, to be able to maximize the performance of their organization, but also to make sure that they're meeting the needs of employees, especially with what we've come through with 3 years of dealing with COVID.
I think we've quickly moved from where you're going to work to how you're going to find the workers, and I know each of you has something to say on that. James, I'm particularly interested in the story you told about trying to find employees, and you ultimately identified a guy that works out at your gym.
Yes. Well, we're looking for outside sales people, an outside salesperson. And when we put an ad in on Indeed, we had 8, again, I'm in manufacturing, and we had 8 applicants. And only 3 out of the 8 had industrial experience, and it wasn't even sales experience. So we were somewhat discouraged about it, our team was. And so I've kind of relegated to just looking for people that are of interest. And so there was somebody at the gym, I was telling the group, who I noticed was just extremely engaging. Asked me how my workout was in the locker room, and I see this person instructing someone who's like 16 years old, as well as talking to somebody who's retired with an enthusiasm and a smile on their face. So I just said, I think I'm going to go up to this person and say, have you considered a career in sales? So I did that, and the guy said, everyone asks me that. And he said, I was just thinking about stepping into that. So we have a second interview coming up next week. And this is the second time I've done that. The first time was a little bit of an odd, awkward moment when I was trying to get somebody, they worked for retail. And I just couldn't get that person off to themselves, so they were wondering why I was stalking them. So that it doesn't always go so easy to do it that way. And I heard Randy Thalen from The Right Place. I think Shelley Irwin was interviewing him a while back. And he said, and I'm winging it here a little bit, like hire first and then develop. And that's as opposed to finding someone who just fits on the resume. So this is kind of along those lines, hire first and then develop. So we'll see how this goes.
Dr. Isley, you talked about in our meeting settling for the 50%, going for the applicant that might check 50% of the boxes and then giving your own training, which I think is what James is talking about. Is that part of the process going forward and part of the answer to the labor shortage?
Yeah, it's always about networking and you're not going to be able to just find what you have. You're not going to be able to say, I want this, I'm going to have it. You're going to have to say, what can I find, and how can I then bring that up to what I need? And that's going to be consistent now, particularly as we're starting to lose the skills in those older groups who are retiring early, and we're replacing them with younger people who think they're as good, and they have great skills, but we all know that it takes 5 years to get good at your job. And so we need to take that time.
Alisha, you work with folks every day that have been struggling to keep people in the marketplace, to keep their restaurants open, to keep the service industry going. What are you hearing from them in terms of finding employees and retaining employees, or maybe even getting old employees back because so many have left the marketplace?
That's a great question. So as I mentioned, we provide food and food service products to anywhere that you would eat a meal outside of the home. So in the presentation earlier, we saw that restaurants and hospitality have experienced a lot of stress and a lot of inflation around wages. Turnover in the restaurant industry is 75%. There's over 15 million jobs in America right now in the restaurant industry, 16.9 million by 2029. And what's interesting is a lot of Americans get their start in the workforce in the restaurant industry. I think the statistic is 1 in 3. So the jobs are there, and so the question is, how do you bring them in, and how do you replace some of the high labor, high hands-on tasks in restaurant operations in this new environment? And so certainly we experienced a lot of the closures through the beginning of COVID, still decreased foot traffic in a lot of restaurants, but delivery and takeout business has never been higher. I think a statistic I read was 65% of Americans are ordering restaurant or delivery at least once a week, and 60% are doing that on delivery apps. And so the restaurants that are thriving right now are the ones who have figured out how to ensure the back of the house is appropriately staffed and leveraging those technology tools. They're also leveraging suppliers like Gordon Food Service to offer value-added products. So before, you may have ordered a case of tomatoes or produce and had people washing, cutting, chopping those products. Well, now they're looking for alternative service providers, so the employees in the location are more focused on the diner experience as opposed to some of those manual tasks. But what's interesting about restaurant employees is they want what everybody else wants. I think that the NRA did a study or a survey of employees, and they said, what are the things that are important to you? And I think it was over 60% said, I want promotional opportunities. I want recognition. I want a pat on the back, kudos, job well done. And we know as business leaders, it's really difficult to make the time to do those things, particularly when you're wearing many hats on a day-to-day basis. But as we look at the things that we know we need to accomplish in our day, or bring diners into a restaurant, like creating a better social media presence, there are ways that aren't necessarily a title promotion or a job promotion that can create a development opportunity for someone. So if you have a really bright, aspiring young person that knows a lot about social media and you don't, leverage them and make them your social media lead, and give them an incentive for increased followers, likes, comments, things like that, because they also all want a cash bonus too. So there are different ways to, of course, retain, engage, develop your employees while also supporting and growing your business.
Some great information there. I'd like to ask any of the other panelists if you'd like to weigh in on particularly attracting and retaining, because it's one thing to hire somebody, but in this environment, there are 5 other jobs that are waiting for them. And so once you get them in the house, you got to figure out a way to keep them there. Janis, I'll begin with you again because you do this day in, day out.
Definitely, every employer is looking at the #1 issue with employers across the nation and in West Michigan is attracting candidates. #2 is retaining, and #3 is supply chain. When we look at the attraction side, we're really encouraging employers. What is it like to come and work at your company? How are you an employer of choice? Have you read your reviews lately? Because every employee that goes to look at a company is going to read what's it like to work at your company. So you might want to inspect that. and see what people are saying about working for you. Your brand is very important. How do you communicate that brand to the marketplace? It's a war for talent. And so how are you going to win that war against all the other companies? You need to make sure that you have a very good strategy. We're really encouraging that talent management or workforce strategy is at the executive level, is that it's just as important as finance. It's just as important as all of your key dashboard metrics, because you have to have a good plan to attract candidates. Candidates are looking for more than ever flexibility. They're looking for how can I be fulfilled at work? What's it like to come into this culture? What's my career plan? Well, how can I build my skills? What's it like to be an employee here? And we also know on the onboarding piece, what's it like to walk in on day one at a company? 90% of people decide if they're going to stay at a company based on their day one experience. 90%. So what is it like to come into your organization on day one? How do you welcome people? How do they feel on that first day? And what does that look like? And 50% of those same people are still deciding if they're going to stay at 90 days. So what does that first week look like, day look like, 30 days look like? Do they have a mentor at work? Do they have a buddy at work? Do they know their pathway when they come into your company? But all these things are so critical because we know that people are moving with their feet. We are seeing the highest quit rates, across the nation, but in Michigan, 3% of people quit their job. And it's staying steady. We know the labor force participation is not moving. There's still people sitting on the sidelines right now. Lots of people are sitting on the sidelines, but we have to help them to come into the workforce, and we really have to provide a very personalized and customized experience for them.
Dr. Isley, you were agreeing with a lot of what she was talking about. We talked about people sitting on the sidelines. Do we know why they're still sitting on the sidelines?
Well, there's several pieces happening. So we talked about that pile of women workers that you should be targeting and thinking about, because they're there and they want to work when we do surveys. So the surveys, by and large, find that a lot of these women want to come back to work. They just can't right this moment. So that's important. We have another group that's retraining. Everybody wanted to get out of food service. And so they took coding classes, or they took other types of classes. Many of those have taken this time to retrain, and those people start trickling back into the workforce. And then we have a third group of people who are known as lying flat. So if you don't know about the lying flat movement, you should look it up. But there's this concept now among young workers that ambition and moving forward in work is a misplaced idea, and that they shouldn't be spending their time thinking about those things. So that we have those three groups of people. Two of them you're going to be able to get back. Realize that across the United States, those two groups that we're getting back are only about 1.5 million people. Here in Michigan, we won't actually see entry-level workers start to increase in quantity until about 2028, 2029, when we start to see the millennial echo start to go up. So these things that you're hearing about, the war on talent, you're going to be talking about it at every single meeting you have for the next 5 years. It's not going to get better. You're going to have to find ways to replace workers or find ways for workers to be able to do more.
Well, with that optimistic outlook, I want to talk a little bit about what all of you have experienced on one level or another, and that is some supply chain interruption. And I suspect everybody up here has dealt with it in some fashion, so I'm just going to let you jump in wherever you want to. And maybe I do start with you, Doctor, again, because you had some projections about the supply chain and how some of those pressures may be relieved, partially because there'll be people going back to work, partially because people are buying alternative products. So talk about that a little bit, and then we'll get everybody to weigh in on that.
So we have a lot of substitution starting to happen, and we've had manufacturing businesses add a lot of additional inventory to their process. So even Toyota, the granddaddy of just-in-time, has massively increased the amount of inventory they have so that they don't have the same disruptions. And we've actually seen the inventory of businesses go up, even as inventory for retailers has dropped to record lows. So that's part of the question that we have going on there. But we also know that the big supply chain problem is China. And so it's really about when does China release trying to have COVID zero. If every time somebody gets COVID, they shut down a port, we're going to continue to have supply chain problems, and it's not going to go away. We know that that won't happen at least until after the Olympics are done. All right? So we're talking at least March before they start releasing that concept. And then they have to swallow their pride to do that, so we know how easy that is. We know that the backlog for retail inventories is at least 6 months. So right now, we're talking about the 3rd to 4th quarter before things start to feel okay, particularly for smaller businesses. And it probably is even longer than that. So understand that supply chain will continue to be an issue in 2022, and you probably won't feel that relief until you start getting into the middle part of 2023.
James?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, we've had some struggle as a manufacturer with in the supply chain. For a while, it was just raw steel that the products that we could get from steel fabricators were 2 to 3 days, and then it went up to 2 to 3 weeks. So our lead times went out. But a lot of that seemed to correct, and now we're just seeing higher prices. But I do have a product line that it's very important to us because it goes to the, I mentioned that we're mostly automotive, but this is for heavy equipment industry like Caterpillar and John Deere, and a really important product line for us that we always, as a distributor, we used to receive in 2 to 3 weeks. And now, then this past summer, it went up to 12 weeks, and now we're at 24 weeks of lead time. So I'm in a position now where I have to call. I don't know how my competitor is shipping still in 3 or 4 weeks, but I've got to call and try to get this line, my arch competitor, and try to sell ourselves that you know, this would be an increase in business for them. I really don't want to do this. I like the lines that I've been working with, but I do not want to lose these customers. So this is something that has kept me up at night, and a very nervous point where we are right now.
In the food service business, and I don't know about your business, but I'm always perplexed by the things that I don't find in grocery stores. And they're just random things. And I notice them only when I go for them and they're not there, and then I just assume I forgot where they are in the grocery store. And then after looking for 20 minutes, and then I ask somebody and they say, oh, we didn't get that this week. Are you seeing the same thing?
Yes, absolutely. And I talked a bit about our food service business. We also have a line of retail grocery stores, over 175 across the eastern part of North America. So we too are feeling that pressure, as well as in our distribution business. And so specifically, the items that are difficult to come by are the ones that have further to travel. And so as you think about items that are coming from tropical islands or climates, grapes, stone fruits, things that we don't grow domestically as much as other products like citrus or avocados coming from the US and Mexico, we're experiencing shortages there. Single packaged items, Heinz ketchup packets, are the hottest commodity right now as you consider what I spoke about earlier with delivery, flatware, disposable containers, things that pre-pandemic we thought in the green sort of trend we were experiencing around sustainability, that styrofoam and unrecycled packaging material weren't going to be a part of life anymore. And as we talked a bit earlier about demand went down so much in the beginning of the pandemic, and it sort of slingshot forward. So everybody was trying to get their hands on these items so they can continue to bolster their business through delivery and takeout. Another thing that I think is interesting is specific commodities like corn and wheat that we grow domestically have been impacted by climate and weather. And then international exporters, Russia's the largest international exporter of wheat. And I don't know if you've been watching the news, but there's a little, geopolitical disruption happening there right now. So even the international supply of wheat, which is important for livestock feed and other grain-based products will be challenging for us here the next few years. So one thing, just perhaps a plea on behalf of the food service industry, and that is give each other grace. Give your clerk in the grocery store, your wait staff, your favorite restaurant, a little bit of grace, because you may not find your favorite item. Your favorite item might not be on the menu, but it isn't their fault. It's not our fault either, but it's not their fault. And everyone's really trying their best. And then, avoid the, yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. I think maybe if everybody in the room gives everybody else in the room a little grace, we'll be a little better off, right?
Yeah, I think that's right.
That's a point well taken.
Yeah, appreciate that.
I want to talk to you about supply of another kind. We talked a little bit earlier about where people are working and how they're working coming back.
Yep.
But we talked earlier too about two different types of supplies. Supply of office space versus supply of manufacturing. Tell me from a real estate standpoint kind of where we are there, because on one hand there may be plenty and on the other hand there may not be any, right?
Yeah, absolutely. In the real estate market, it's really depends on the sector. You have office, which was, and retail, which we're not doing very well over the last couple of years, but multifamily and industrial have done extremely well. When you think about industrial, you have to break that up into warehousing and manufacturing. Warehouse manufacturing and logistics. And if you think about that sector, I wish I would have spent a lot more time in that 20 years ago, because that sector is just blowing up across our board, especially in the transportation hubs of Indianapolis, Columbus, Chicago, Nashville, those centrally located. But even in West Michigan, it's under 3% in the industrial market right now of what's available. And there was 1 million square feet went online last year, another 2.5 million square feet looking to come online this year. And for the most part, it's spoken for. Part of that is just, West Michigan, we don't do a lot of speculative development, and pretty conservative both from a banking standpoint and a developer standpoint. So we don't overbuild, so we can kind of weather some of this transitional years in 2007, 2008, and now. But that being said, there's definitely some winners and losers in the real estate development market, and multifamily and especially logistics has been strong. And I was just doing some reading last night. I thought it was pretty interesting, and I actually don't have a comment on it yet, but e-commerce was by far our largest square foot taker in 2020, but both 3PL and just general logistics companies were by far last year. So I'm not sure exactly what to think of that, but I was just reading it last night, and I thought I'd ponder on that a bit.
All right. And we'll leave the rest of us to ponder. We've got about 5 minutes left. I'm going to start down at the far end. And I just want to get you to weigh in, each of you to weigh in on what you see as, and I'd like to get to both of these if we can, what may be some of the biggest challenges for your particular business or industry as we move forward in this year, and what some of the biggest opportunities are from your perspective. We'll start at your end.
Thank you. I think one of the biggest challenges for me is still inflation. I've got 6 skilled workers on staff, and I know that they drive by a Culver's, for example, and they'll see a starting wage of $18 an hour. And I pay more than that, but it's not a lot for some of our more entry-level people. So I do worry that I feel a tremendous amount of pressure to push inflation up or to push their wages up. And you, Dr. Isley, you even had a slide that showed manufacturing went up, I think, 4%, but inflation was up at 8%. So we'll see how that holds. I think that this year is going to be flat with maybe some good some good spots and lower spots, but I think that margins will be a little bit less just due to inflation and the higher prices. But I'm thankful. We've made it through a couple of years, and I don't talk a whole lot about flexibility with my people because we've had to have so much flexibility due to COVID. I've had people out so many weeks, from contact tracing to so many things. So I'm kind of looking forward to that settling out. We'll see how this goes this year. So.
Let me guess, Janice, your challenge is going to be finding people.
Yes. Yeah, it's really unprecedented, but I think one big challenge is that certainly workforce management needs to really be a focus and a very strategic focus. I also think that we need to make sure that we're communicating throughout the whole organization, not just HR and the CEO, but that every single member of your organization knows what is happening out in the workplace and the workforce. We find that sometimes the messaging doesn't get down to the person that has the most impact on an employee, which is that direct supervisor. The most important relationship that somebody has at work is with their direct supervisor, and so it's so critical that that direct supervisor knows that we're in a demographic drought, knows that their responsibility is to figure out how to retain the employees, that their responsibility is to make sure that they provide a great experience for that employee and for their team. So I think it's the big challenge is, of course, retention and attraction. But it's also our biggest opportunity, because I think employers are really looking inside. They're really looking at that employee as they knew it was their greatest asset, but they're also looking at how that can even go to even higher levels. And I think they're looking at strategic partnerships with all of our community partners. They're opening their doors wider. They're becoming more inclusive. There's more voices at the table. So in all of these things, when we really have to look and we're pressed, we actually become better for it. So I think there's some great opportunities in it all as well.
Jeff, quickly, challenges and opportunities for you and your industry.
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge is I was sitting at my table and listening to Meredith talk about certainty and providing certainty. I think the biggest challenge for me is uncertainty in the office market and how the pandemic is going to play out and and how the businesses react to it. So it will be interesting. You know, I know what the 4 things I think are going to happen in 2022. But that being said, the uncertainty I think is my biggest challenge.
Dr. Isley, I've got 2 minutes between the two of you. What do you think, upside, downside?
I think it's going to be a really good year. I think people are going to be happy. I think they're going to feel that slowdown near the end of the year. And my big question for the year is going to be, does those increases in the amount that people have to pay for mortgages on a new house start to overcome that pile of millennials that we have here in Kent County? Because it's that pile of millennials that give us our strength.
All right, and quickly, in your business, upside, downside.
I think one of the biggest challenges we're all facing is organizational fatigue. Everyone is tired. They have gone through a lot of things, both at work and at home. And it's also an opportunity to reinvest in employees, to re-engage, to remind people what they're doing is important. It matters. They matter. I don't think there's any better experience or life experience than what we all just weathered together. And so from here on out, it has to be easier, right?
Let's hope so. Let's hope so. Panel, I want to thank you all very much. Great job, and I appreciate it. We could go on for a long time. And let me introduce Rick Baker, the president and CEO of the Grand Rapids Chamber.